Yeah, there we are again. Another Tuesday. Again, it somehow feels like Friday already, but
Yeah.
I guess that's not the case. Welcome back to another freshly squeezed
Hello.
episode of PKs on Air. With me again is the incredibly smart Dominique Seppelt. Domi, how are you?
Hey, yeah,
All
good to
good?
be back. It's getting cold and dark again in Berlin, so it's not that like sunny, fresh squeezed in Dominique this week, but
No summer.
yeah,
That's what you're trying
winter,
to say, huh? No
yeah,
summer.
yeah, winter is coming, and also we already started, of course, in creating and thinking about Christmas campaigns
Oh
for
yeah.
content marketing. So I'm
Hmm.
completely into Christmas at the moment. It's like, oh no, it's too early.
And that is really early.
Yes.
That is indeed very early. But yeah, I mean, then again, it's only well, not even kind of 2 months to kind of execute, right? So I
Yeah,
guess
yeah. So whenever I
the
go to some supermarkets, I see all the sweets already there since 4 weeks or so. So
yeah, yeah.
yeah, I think it's just in time for publishing Christmas content.
Well, some people are very much into this, like, the nougat marzipan and all of those
Yeah,
other funny things. So I think
definitely.
some actually welcome that this stuff is back into the supermarkets as early as humanly possible. So
Yeah.
I don't think, well, I guess, each to their own, or that's what they say, right? But yeah.
So
Anyhow,
how about you? How are you today?
I'm good, I would say. I'm reasonably well. Let's put it that way. I I kind of stuck my head into a lot of paperwork and contract work, which is, I guess, good and bad at the same time. So yeah, you kind of lose time and like
Yeah.
track of time when you're into that. But I guess overall it's good. I mean, I think we said it a couple of times already. There's it looks like some of the things are somewhat getting back, even though I saw that, especially in Berlin, we apparently didn't behave too well. There's some more lockdowns. We saw it, right, with also some like a potential new colleague who was kind of supposed to come over from the UK, which couldn't fly due to like the recent restrictions. So I mean, as we have been saying, right, it's kind of far from over, which I mean, was to be expected, obviously.
Yeah.
But I think business-wise, I would argue that it can still be and will still be a good 2021. I mean, it looks like some of the usual Christmas madness is still happening, right? I mean, we have been seeing that in the other years as well, and I think also for some of your teams, they are like completely booked by now. So I think also overall, um, again, I think it's wrong to say it's back to normal, which is not the case. But at least business wise, I mean, budgets are there. Companies need to advertise, and I guess like with the shock that we saw a couple of months back, that somewhat kind of got back to this like, yeah, well, we need to kind of crack on and get things done. So yeah, I mean, good and bad at the same.
Yeah.
As everyone trying to deal with the crazy
Yeah. Yeah.
circumstances. So, but no, overall good. Just a lot, but I mean, what do I tell you, right? What do I tell you? It's intense, but which kind of makes me kind of even more happy, to be honest, that we managed to at least, I wouldn't say squeeze this one in, but are kind of able to spend a bit of time and talk about a topic that I think is, or we, I guess, also probably should say as a company, think is incredibly important, right? And that's like around localization, like all the international aspects that a
Yeah.
campaign can have, but specifically, I guess and I'm very, very curious on your takes, like the mistakes that we see oftentimes that people kind of compare apple with oranges, right? So translation, localization, not necessarily the same. Far from, I would argue, but I guess again, I'm curious on your take on that, and I guess some of the things around that. So I think one of the things that we do day in and day out, especially with our international clients, where we kind of are quite used to either create globally or then roll out when something works really, really well, and then kind of start scaling it. And I guess each of that has like this kind of international aspect to it in terms of concept, but also then I guess in terms of like how do you actually properly execute something like that, right?
Yeah.
I think this is
one of the major
important.
Points, right? So that's why, I brought like a small mixture out of some cases, some visualizations for today, but also a lot of, not a lot, I try to keep it short and simple, but some slides also about the process and the execution, because I think that's the major part, especially when we talk about like different or multiple languages and like interactive campaigns, and then you have like 20 people involved, and that's why I think the process is a very huge point or stage or step in the content localization. So let's see.
So I guess that's gonna be a really good one, and then we can see if we still do have some time. There's a whole bunch of things going on. Google being broken again, from what I saw, some canonicalization and indexing issues and whatnot, which kind of seems to be becoming the new norm. Let's say. It happened quite frequently. So yeah, I'm kind of. I haven't investigated too deep. I think haven't had any clients visibly affected. Doesn't mean they're not affected at all, but I guess that's something. And there's a bunch of other things that kind of happened in the last 2 weeks. But I would say before we go there, let's just get started with our main topic. Some quick housekeeping and those things once you're bringing up the share. Show notes are linked below, so we have like the previous episodes there, or at least the recent ones. So if you want to poke around, there's the links in there. There's the replay. We are going to continue doing that. And if you have questions, comments, feedback, let us know. We'd be happy to take that in the comments. We should be live at least on Facebook, on Twitter, Twitch. So feel free to chat along. Be happy to see you there. Or that, of course, also works if you would just kind of want to interact with us on Twitter. Handles are below. I'm always up for a chat there as well, because, well, sometimes there's just stuff that I guess pops in a bit after, right? So without further ado, what I will do is I bring up the screen share, if that works. Yes, fantastic. And then I would say over to you, Domi.
Cool. So you can see my screen now.
Should be there.
Perfect. Okay. So so thanks for the introduction. I can leave it out here at this point. So today, of course, it's about successful content localization. And of course, why? Because content localization is basically more than just a translation, of course. And I think, or I wanted to start with one major question. And this one is, what does content localization really mean? Because that's a question I'm answering many, many times, because we got a lot of inquiries for content translations, actually, and then we try to figure out what is it about, what campaign are we speaking about, what kind of inquiry is that really, and then we see in like 99% of all the cases that it's more about a content localization and not a purely translation. So what does that really mean? Of course, it's about adapting content. It's not just translating, because of course, translating is like more or less, translating the content from one language to another. But when we talk about content localization, of course, when do we talk about content localization? I think basically when a content piece needs to be distributed on another market, it has to be, of course, prepared accordingly, but not only when a content piece needs to be distributed, but also when there's like different kind of content formats like expert articles or infographics or ebooks or whatever, and it should work and perform on several markets. You should talk about content localization. On the next step, we will go a bit deeper on that, of course, why it's a localization. But yeah, as mentioned, localization is not only translating from one language to another. And yeah, instead of the translation, it means to really work with the content and on the content, and work also, of course, on target audience. Here's a very short overview what content localization really means. Yeah, I think yeah, it's pretty clear that language cannot be translated one-on-one, let's say. So especially when I think about like German. What is Redewendungen in English? What's the word for?
Wow, that's a tough one. Now I have to look it up.
Like,
let me do it quickly. Redewendung.
I've never thought about that word in English, to be honest. Redewendungen.
Figure of speech. The figure of speech. Yeah.
All right. So yeah, in that case, of course, thank you. In German, we have so many super weird and old and historically grown. What was the word again? Sorry.
Figures of speech, or it could also be an idiom, I think, or a saying.
True, it's an idiom. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So we have like. I mean, I think, or I assume that we have that in many languages, but especially
sure.
there are so many of these idioms where when you do some research about it, it really has like historical context. So it doesn't really work to localize or to translate that one over to English. So there are like tons of memes on social media from like German idioms translated in bad English over to English. So that means it's basically not possible to translate language one-on-one, but also when we talk about topics, a topic, of course, must be relevant in every kind of market you plan to publish your content piece. Then we have, of course, the fact of social political circumstances on the situation the country has at the moment or the market has at the moment. So also there, especially when you talk about like political content or like economic content or whatever, so everything which could be or could have an difference in the specific markets, you should also take a look on that, of course. Then what we see, of course, user behavior is pretty different also there on different markets. I have a small example later on. I mean, when we talk about like Germany and France, for example, it's not like those massive differences in kind of web design, let's say, or like also user experience approaches. But yeah, we found some interesting examples. There was a comparison between German and Chinese websites, which is a pretty strong example, I assume. But also there, user behavior, of course, differentiates from different markets. Then the media landscape, of course, whenever we talk about content outreach and everything about that, like digital PR and everything in that field of content marketing, also there, like media outlets work completely different, like outreach approaches are different also there. So this is also something you should always take care of. And design also goes a bit hand in hand with the user behavior part. Also there, lot of market differences, let's say. So relevance and usage also here for content marketing. Why should you think about content localization or international content marketing campaigns? Of course, saving resources. I think that's one of the most important things over here, because when you plan to work on an international content marketing campaigns or in like a scalable international content marketing campaigns, it makes sense to do or to have just like one ideation stage where you think about or do the research for all the markets at the same time. So it's not like doing the work for 10 markets 10 times. It's like doing once finding the ideas, having once the creative process, having once the research part, which is super relevant here. And
also about cost efficiency in this case, right? I mean, at the end of the day, as you said, you don't want to do it like 10 times. So obviously, if you don't consider that, then that's going to be getting very expensive.
Definitely. I think also exactly when we talk about design and development, right? So here exactly the same. So everybody knows how expensive it can be to create like, I don't know, interactive landing pages with interactive maps and whatever. And that's, very time-consuming, resource-consuming content format. And when you have the chance to do or to work on several markets at the same time with the same campaign, it's pretty much cost-efficient here, And also when we talk about outreach, that's the fourth pillar, I would say. Also here, having like outreach on several markets, you can test your strategies on a bigger scale, of course, when you work with email tracking and everything around that. You can test more outreach angles and learning, of course, from other markets. So then I think the second big question here, Bastian, you already mentioned it. How do I implement such project? I think that's always the major question and a very long answer here. I think what I wanted to say before we go a bit deeper into the process is like there are, I would say, like two scenarios. One is, of course, you already created one content marketing campaign and now you're thinking about maybe I can use it for several markets, maybe I can try to localize that one, or you plan from the very beginning, you know which markets you are working on and you plan from the very beginning to work on an international content marketing campaigns. I think those are the two scenarios we see, and that's why or where some differences are, of course, because when you localize an existing campaign, it's a bit more about evaluation, I would say, and when you plan from the very beginning to work on an international campaign, then it's more about the analysis phase in the very beginning and also the coordination between that one. So let's start with the process. You can see there are a lot of arrows to follow, but let's start with the first one, with the fundamentals, I would say. I think very important, of course, or one of the fundamentals, as it's mentioned here, is carrying out gap analysis to check whether a localization is reasonable, which means check out if you really need the content. Do you have the product? When it's a very product specific content marketing campaign, of course you should check if there's relevance. So do you have the product over there? Do you have the same directory, let's say, over there? Do you have the same market target audience over there? Goes pretty much hand in hand also with your knowledge about technical restrictions also here. So do you have like a different CMS in another market or another continent, let's say, or whatever? Which kind of domain structure do you have? Can you implement those international campaigns, or would you need to design or host like 10 different infographics, let's say, or like interactive campaigns? So everything around that should be carried out at the very beginning. So check if you have access to everything. What are the technical restrictions? What can you work on? Which one you cannot do maybe on several markets? And also, do you really need the content? Do you have the same keyword set? Is the keyword set even relevant on the market? How is it about the search volume about that content? And also here, check out, of course, your competition over here. So maybe there is no demand anymore, but also maybe your competitors have invented in one of those markets the 100% perfect content marketing campaign or whatever. You should consider maybe adjusting the content a bit more rather than just like taking it one-on-one for every market. Of course, team setup also here, super important. So check if you have resources, if you have access to those resources, but also which kind of synergies you can work on here, especially when you work with, like, I don't know, several markets, of course. Who needs to be involved? Because this is what we have seen in so many cases. So whenever you have like local teams and global teams and several countries involved, of course you could have also like local PRs and global PRs and local IT and global brand, for example. So this is one of my most important suggestions here, I would say. So always before considering working on those international and global campaigns, try to figure out your resources and try to get in touch with all the involved people, or who should be involved, at least people from the very beginning, and also make clear everything about technical restrictions. Then it's about, of course, finding the right topic. When everything is clear about like technical restrictions, but also resources, then of course you need to find a proper topic. Here it makes sense, of course, to work with any kind of metrics, to have like all the countries there you want to work on, but also like several topics. Maybe you already have one topic which you want to or planning to localize, or you're thinking like on a creative stage and thinking about different kind of content ideas. Then of course you should list it in a matrix or in any kind of table for those markets. Maybe also together with the keyword set you are thinking about for each topic, and then you should evaluate which kind of topic I should go into deeper research, depending on how many overlaps you have, of course. So in an ideal world, of course, you should have like at least one overlap with all the countries for at least one topic to make it or to realize the campaign. But that really helps to work with any kind of metrics to find the right order, let's say. Then also here, when we talk now or go back into the two different scenarios we have seen, I mentioned already that there's one scenario where you have already one existing campaign and then think about localizing it to another market, because afterwards you realize maybe that should also make sense for my other market. And here's one example for an infographic which is or was created for the German market initially, but afterwards, I think a few months later, over to the French market as well. And what we can see here for the first sight, it looks like pretty similar, I would say. I mean, of course, there's another language. It's the left one is German, the right one is French. But it's a bit more than that. It's not just like a translation. It's also like working with several or different numbers. There is a bit of research behind this infographic. So it's not like a visualization of something. Of course, there are some statistics behind. And the statistics we had for the left infographic, for the German one, are completely German-based, because in those infographic, it's about like data and facts about German babies, let's say. So where we were like, does it really make sense to localize that, because it's obviously a pretty German-based content campaign. But then we thought, okay, there are like data from the government, of course, where it's about like how many babies are born in the specific year, each year in France. So it's basically just a small desk research for the to be localized market. And then, of course, a translation. We knew already which kind of data we are searching for, which meant that it's not that much effort to localize that one. What we saw after creating or localizing that campaign or that infographic, that it's like that we only needed for the French version of the infographic only 25% of the initial effort we had for the German infographic. So and it was super relevant, of course. So of course we did the research before we decided to do that. And there was no existing graphic about this topic, so it was super reasonable to do that and pretty close to the topic our client is selling. So then we have another example here, also the same markets, Germany and France. This is an interactive map. Here we had the second scenario where it was clear from the very beginning that we are planning to create an international content campaign for several markets. So we, in the phase of, or in the stage of ideation and the creative stage, we were super into like, okay, which kind of content is relevant everywhere? Where do we can see or collect like government data, or where we have data or access to data which are relevant across all Europe. So yeah, we decided to do like an interactive map for that client, where it was about like living in Europe, let's say, with some filters on the left side and some more details. It was like how much does an average rent, or how high are the average rental costs, I think, when I remember that right. It's a bit longer ago, but like everything about living in Europe in the specific countries. And yeah, why have we done that? Of course, because here is what we see, that the development effort, but also design effort, is just doing once, because we have, or we use the exact same content and content format for Germany, but also for France, and also like for several countries. Everything we needed to do is like literally just translating the content, like the written content, because the data were localized from the very beginning, or not even localized, because the research part was done for all the markets in Europe. So which means it was more or less a translation of the written words, and then more a localization of the outreach period we have afterwards. And there we can see, it's, even if it's an interactive campaign, which basically means a lot of effort for design, development, and the whole team, where many, many people are involved, we had just 20% of the initial effort was required here for the localization from the German over to the France interactive campaign, because only the data needed to be updated in our interactive content piece. Yeah, so I think that's a very good example of content formats which are easy to localize. But of course, not all content formats can be localized efficiently. As mentioned, or as I've already shown, database maps are super easy to localize and super efficient, of course. Infographics as well, only here you should take care of if you have like easy access to data which you can localize, or even better, if there are already data, or if there is already a data visualization on the infographic which you only need to translate, let's say. Then it's of course even more efficient, because then you do not need to know do the research part from the beginning. Then we have, of course, like expert articles. This is like there I would say it really depends on the experts if it's efficient, and if I would suggest to do that on an international level. Really depends. So when you have like an expert, an influencer, or a person who is super well known in the specific industry, or across several markets, like let's say for all the English speaking countries, then of course it would make totally sense to work like with international expert articles. But if you have like very country specific experts, it doesn't really make sense to localize it, because of course when we work on an expert article in Germany and have like 5 experts involved about like do-it-yourself projects, and nobody knows about them in France, it won't help us in any kind of goals. It will not help us with like brand awareness. It will not help us to do like any kind of online or digital PR or everything around that. So yeah, there I would say it really depends on the expert you are working with. If the expert is not well known in the specific markets, then you should or would have exactly the same effort to do in every kind of market, and then it's not like efficient anymore, I would say. And yeah, same with content, of course. Not every kind of content is easy or efficient to localize. Cross-national data, of course, that makes totally sense here. I have the same example again. Oh, one step back. The same example over here, because we work with European data, very easy and efficient to localize. Also country-specific data makes totally sense here, but like country-specific topics, when you have like huge data-driven campaigns, let's say, maybe where you also have like the survey behind, or did like a huge research part, and the whole campaign is only about like the one like one topic which is only interesting in this one market, then of course, yeah, it's not only not efficient, it just makes no sense to localize that kind of content over to another market. Yeah, then of course we have a small part of project management. Project management is super important here, of course, when we talk about content localization, because it needs a lot of people involved. So of course, please make sure to have like a proper project roadmap and also like campaign briefings for all involved people. Then we have like target audience analysis, which is, I would say also a very time-consuming part. Over here it's about like evaluating the relevance, of course, of the topics you want to work on, check on local holidays on the specific markets, check on the political circumstances, but also like newsworthy events, if there are any kind of festivals, brand awareness days or whatever. Also here super important when we talk about target audience analysis, and also, as mentioned a bit before, check on the media landscape. How was it working there when you haven't do any kind of outreach campaigns over the specific market? A little reminder, we already have spoken about that one. So please make sure or have that topics in mind, that the language is not easy to, or not just a translation, and all the parts we already went through. Then I have a very small example here also, where it's about market analysis example and a comparison between Germany and France. Those are some of our insights we have, or we see when we do like content campaigns between those two markets. For instance, topics. In Germany, it's pretty popular to work with like topics, like regional topics, because there's always like a small, let's say, city bashing or something going on between the northern cities in Germany and the southern cities. So there it's like, always super successful to work with data-driven campaigns, where it's about, in the northern part of Germany, people are, more or investing more money in their weddings than people in the southern part of Germany. This is something German media loves to cover. In France,
or you just bash Munich.
No,
right?
I wouldn't say
that. Always works anyways. God, no, you wouldn't. Okay, fair enough. But I think this is what it comes down to, if you ask me.
It's a topic, or I would say a very well-known headline in Germany, or especially also in Berlin. There are so many comparisons from between cities, like German cities. Yeah, it's crazy. True. So every city and every village wants to be the best one and the most successful one, of course. This is something we cannot see in France. We had localized a lot of campaigns, or worked on many campaigns in France, where we wanted or tried to do something or visualize a comparison between different regions of France. It doesn't work at all. We tried it so many times. I don't know why, but the media has never been interested in those topics. What we also see is like the text length in France is like 30% longer than we see in German content. So whenever you work, especially with the localization, the same content will be 30% longer when you just translate it from German over to French, which means when you think about also the web design or the landing page design, you should take care of it, that you always need a bit more space when you localize from German over to France. That's also what we see for infographics and every kind of content campaigns. The French content is always way longer than the German content.
And then oftentimes the layout gets ruined, right? So I think this is something that's not trivial, really. Yeah,
definitely.
Also with headlines, especially, right?
Yeah, headlines is one of the most problematic topics, let's say, or I would say we have seen in several campaigns where we hadn't thought about it early enough, and then we saw like, okay, everything breaks down to the next line, and was like, oh no.
So you have like 2-line headlines, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's one of our most important findings, I would say, here when it's about content localization from Germany to France. Addressing people in France, the formal you is more important than the not informal you, let's say, more than in Germany. Surprisingly, when we talk about like outreach, but also in our content campaigns, like in written words for or the editorial part of our campaigns. And what I found super interesting also is like the media landscape. When we talk here also about content distribution, Twitter is a super popular distribution channel for content campaigns, and everything about the editorial part, pretty similar to the UK. What we definitely not see in Germany at all.
So no one cares about Twitter in Germany, right? I mean,
exactly, yeah. It's like you have like I wouldn't say niche industries, but like smaller industries are having their exchanges, of course, on Twitter. But when it's about like content and having or getting in touch with journalists, it doesn't really make sense on do that in Germany. Also imprint is not often to be found in France. Makes it hard to find any kind of contact, of course. In Germany, it's a must. So you need to do that by law to have like the imprint whenever you sell something on your website. In France, it's not the same. So it's pretty hard sometimes to get any kind of content information there. And the outreach is shorter but more formal in total. So I have another example here. This is a bit funny. This is because the first one was a comparison about the content, let's say, when we talk about editorial content, and this is more about the web design part. I mentioned a bit before that, of course, also web design is of course different in different countries. Here's a very strong example. This is a comparison between like a Chinese and a German platform. I think that it's a video. Can we see that now? Yes.
Yeah, that works.
So, and it's a job platform, but an official one. That's super important to say here. So where we can see on the Chinese example, there's like for us, a lot of advertisement, a lot of like banners, and super many colors and flickering and like colorful stuff. And then we see like a typical German
boring website,
boring platform, whatever. So this, of course, it's a strong example, but this I just wanted to emphasize, let's say, for the topic of having like different approaches on different markets, of course, when we talk about web design and UX, of course.
It kind of gets even worse, right? When you also have like languages that are like left to right and not right to left. So I guess that's also something like in another kind of special case. So not visually, but then like conceptually.
Exactly.
It's a totally different game. So I think I think as you said, like localizing in Europe is one thing, and then localizing beyond that. So like Asian countries, Arabian countries, and dialects. I think this is again a totally different beast.
Completely different.
Great example.
And then of course after we made sure to talk about like the fundamentals, project management, everything is in place. We know about the target audience, everything. Then we can go on to localization, on the real localization, of course. So which means everything from design development, but also text, including like social assets, but also like newsletter content, for instance, and everything you have. Here pretty easy. Of course, you need briefings for content marketing, but also editorial, like a project or a proper project plan. Here, localization, proofreading, QA, I think that's pretty clear. You need that for every kind of content creation. And the same one also for design development, like specific briefings. And please make sure which kind of requirements you have. Of course, there like the localized text needs to be in the same format for all the countries. So whenever it comes to data-driven content and like Excel files, especially there, it's super important to not only localize the content in your in your file, in your Excel file, but also localize the whole table, but work with the same columns, because otherwise, the development will go crazy when just updating the content over there. And also here, of course, make sure to have like the quality assurance after each step you have, and before it goes into development. And then we have the outreach. So once the content campaign goes live, we can also talk about, of course, like digital PR outreach, where we have like market-specific strategies, of course, because the networks are working completely different. And also there it's super important to work with localized outreach templates, but also localized strategies. Here's a very small example of a comparison between Germany and the Netherlands, where we talk about outreach. Here what we see is what we have seen during the last years, that in the Netherlands it's even more important to create content campaigns or content which also works, where it's easy to share on social networks. This is what we do not see that many or not that strong in Germany. Really depending on the goals, of course, you have with your content campaign, but it not really goes hand in hand in Germany to have like a content campaign which should be like keyword optimized and generate your leads or everything around that, but also should be shareable for social media. This is very not that often seen, but on the Netherlands even stronger. LinkedIn is here super important. So you should have like a proper LinkedIn profile where you really work with, because Dutch editors really like to check on or evaluate how trustworthy you are during or within your LinkedIn profile. Trust, I mean, when we talk about outreach and digital PR, it's everything about trust and network, I guess, in all countries, but especially here we see that it's the period of getting in touch with people and working or building up a proper network does even take longer than in Germany. What I've seen, that's the point on the right side, make time for your dialogue partner. This is crazy because an average outreach call in the Netherlands takes up to 30 minutes, which is super long, where we have like the comparison to Germany. When we have like outreach calls, it's like, I think the average is like 2 or 3 minutes per call. So they ask a lot of questions. They really want to make sure who you are, what are you working on, what kind of research have you done for your campaign. So this is what we really see as a major difference from Germany and the Netherlands when it comes to outreach.
Interesting.
Yeah, super interesting. We have seen that during the last years, but it's getting even stronger, because I was always like, okay, the Germans are like super detailed into like reliable data and asking a lot of questions and want to make sure that everything is reliable, let's say. They do that, but they do that on their own, like German journalists. They do not ask that many questions, and they do not want to have like long phone calls. They're like, okay.
So they kind of do it afterwards, right?
Yeah. Exactly. They're just like, okay, drop me a line, send me an email, and leave me alone and do not call again.
Get off my line, yeah. Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So super interesting here, and super important also for when you plan about your outreach period, and also who you want to or how to step into a new market when you never did some outreach on the Netherlands. I think kind of important to know before that you need to plan enough time for stepping there into the game. And then, of course, at the end of every campaign, doesn't really matter if it's an international campaign or just a local campaign, of course, measuring your success. But here, of course, I would suggest to do it per target market, but also like per specific market, but also on a global level. And also here, like the typical monitoring setup you should have for every kind of content marketing campaign to make sure or to measure your success afterwards. And then just my 3 major key takeaways, let's say, review restrictions and demand in advance. So everything in terms of technical restrictions, topics of relevance, but also like resources. Please check that from the very beginning, even before thinking about which kind of campaign to localize. Then, of course, analyze the market, know your target audience, do your homework, and know your target group. but also like the media landscape. And then, of course, do not only translate, but adapt the content, localize the content, and always think about the market circumstances, and localize successfully. Yeah, I think that's it.
Perfect. Yeah, that was more than 20 minutes, but hey, there we go.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
no worries. I would have cut you off if it wouldn't have been interesting. So you know me. No, it was great. I mean, there's so much stuff, and you probably could have gone on for quite some more time as always, right? I mean, there's like so many things that can go wrong, but also just are important to know. I mean, we just put the slides to the show notes, so if you want to kind of poke around afterwards, that's totally fine, of course, as well. And I think what I could now ask questions and we kind of go on forever, but I guess the major mistakes is probably something that people are like keen on. So what do you think is like the top stuff that you see going wrong all the time? I mean, I guess we already talked about generally like that localization is not necessarily translation. You talked, I think, a lot about resources. I think that one is quite understood, but is there anything else that we would say, just very briefly, what is the stuff that goes wrong?
Good question. So I've seen a lot of campaigns which were created in the UK, and I have the impression that content campaigns in the UK are a bit more. I wouldn't say yellow press based, but like a bit more easy to consume content, and this is something which doesn't really work that well in Germany, and this is but many try to do exactly that one. So I've seen so many content with like serious topics, to be honest, about like car insurances, but also about, I don't know, like healthcare and fintech topics, which were created very playful, but also like with not that much data, but also not that many information, I would say, and then just translate it over to Germany or for the language, and I was like, okay, I just cannot imagine that something would ever cover that kind of content. Even there's a strong brand behind, because it's just basically not working, because the design is too playful, too less information. This is something I see in many cases, and then of course like the typical experience, let's say, with wrong localizations or wrong translations, bad translations, where you just start the text and are like in the third line and recognize, I'm not sure who have written that, but definitely not a native speaking.
It's not native. I guess so. And do you have like maybe one like last tip, or like, because I mean, I think one of the things that you highlighted was the like complexity, let's say, of stakeholder management and way too many parties sometimes being involved, or at least I would say wanting to have their say in things. Well, sometimes I would guess rightfully so, sometimes maybe just for the sake of it, right? So what, like, I mean, how do you usually go about that? Is it just getting everyone on board early enough, or is it clear lines of like who is having a say in what any thoughts on that?
Really depending on the company, of course, but I always try to think about the campaign and the requirements on a local level. So thinking about, okay, on our core market, let's say Germany, who is involved in the project anyway? So is it somebody from the IT, brand, PR, and maybe an SEO or whoever? So thinking about that one, and then trying to ask as many questions to myself before I go or take the next step. So taking a look at domain structure, but also like the CMS, and try to be or to see the problems at the very beginning or the potential issues,
and then trying to prevent it, right? Yeah, okay, makes
trying
sense.
to prevent it, and after that one going on a global level, because of course, I mean, when it's like in global content marketing campaigns, you definitely need to have like brand on board. So, and this is in my experience the hardest step, let's say, to get like a proper international campaign here. But I try to prevent at the very beginning, like the whole like the technical issues, let's say, and try to understand first of all on the local market, and then
right
to imagine how it should work.
Then go like put it up globally. I see.
Yeah.
What I would think is that because you were talking a bit about outreach in general and outreach testing. I think you mentioned pre-outreach at some point. I would think that this is actually outreach in general is probably maybe a good topic for another episode at some point in the future, because I think and I also, if I recall correctly, when we did like one of the early episodes more around Corona, that was also about like tone of voice and communication in general. So I think this kind of somewhat all ties a bit together. So maybe that's something that we should go in a bit deeper in the future. I think for next week, what I've seen, and I just put it on our backlog now, is also there was a really interesting e-com study that got released just today. So I think next week we might just do a bit of a more generic one, but maybe in 2 or 3 weeks' time, I would think that we should just go a bit more into outreach and things that are potentially there on that front. Maybe we can even bring in someone from your team and see how that will be received. So why not? Yeah, I think because we are already at over 50 minutes, and if I recall, we said we want to try with 45. But I'd say we failed miserably. But well, anyhow, it is what it is. It was still like a really like cool condensed view on international. So yeah, if you have any questions out there, also maybe when you kind of went through the recap or went another time through the slides, please by all means feel free to get in touch. As I said, we are on Twitter, on LinkedIn, whatever works best for you. Subscribe there, or go the other way and just find us on Twitter directly. Talk to me, talk to Dominique, send us an email, whatever you like. I'll be happy to kind of get your feedback generally on the content ideas, things that we should do differently. And with that, I would say we close it off for today, and we'll be back with another episode next week, same time, around 4-ish German time. So, Dominique, thanks again for the slides and for all the info. Much appreciated. And I guess with that, we are signing off.
Yep, great. See you next week. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.